When you look at the Nigerian bar, if the case with the bar is even worse. If I tell you, you won't believe that in Nigeria we have a situation where lawyers in urban towns get as low as 15,000 naira in a month. That is why at the bar summit, one of the senior advocates raised concern and even suggested that we should have minimum wage for legal practitioners. And that should depend on their places of jurisdiction. Let's say if a legal practitioner is practicing within the FCT or is practicing in Lagos or Port Harcourt, then the minimum wage for that lawyer should be different from when a legal practitioner is practicing, for example, in places like Asaba. We need legislative reform with respect to the judiciary that will give independence in terms of fiscal policy, and then or a budgetary allocation from the part of the executive that will be enough to take care of some of the problems that judges have been raising. From the bar, we need legislative reform. Let me give you an example. We just have the Nigerian bar that is doing the alpha and omega of bar activities as it relates to a lawyer. But in advanced jurisdiction where we claim to be copying some of the things they are doing, if you go to England, they have the Bar Council created what they call the Bar Standards Board. The Bar Standards Board consists of both lawyers and non-lawyers. And that board regulates not just the conduct of legal practitioners, but the admission of people to practice as barristers in England and Wales. They also regulate legal services that legal practitioners render to the members of the society. Do we have such mechanism working here? No. Do we have a reform? Do we have minimum wage for lawyers? No. So every lawyer is at will and at pleasure to give whatever he thinks. In fact, there are some firms where the lawyers are not paid anything at all. They are just told that it is even a privilege that you have to be associated with us, and therefore you should not be given the money. And that is why we have even the case where lawyers, you go to places like Corporate Affairs Commission, lawyers are involved in certain practices that are considered as unbecoming. And that's why I applaud the NBA president with the issues he has raised. Maybe conversation will lead to a resolution by the NBA that will bring about reform reform at the bar level before we look at the judiciary.
If I could bring this in, because still continuing that thread of reforms and seeing how we could get a lot of integrity back in our judicial system, would it be a good idea, for instance, if lawyers were to publicly advertise their services and ask for clients to come in?
Right. Well, in England, reform has led to that. But I think that it is premature in Nigeria for us to open up that window. Because once we do it, I guarantee you the bar will be destroyed. Because champati and some of these advertising, in a way by which a lawyer advertises himself, I believe that if a lawyer is effective, the media, they are helping the matter. If a lawyer is effective, most of the cases in court are covered by the media. Newspaper reports of activities of the bar. So if a lawyer is effective and hardworking, it is very possible for the members of the bar, from what they see or hear, to draw a conclusion that this lawyer is somebody I can consult. But another problem I just come to my mind, and I thought I should say that. There is a complaint that when it comes to the consultation by especially politicians or high-profile clients, that they always say, if you want to win your case, go to XYZ lawyer, go to B lawyer. And that in most cases, when a reference like that is made, it is not necessarily because that lawyer is skillful or because of his industry and scholarship, but that in most cases, this kind of reference is because they believe that if you see that lawyer, he has the capacity to either influence the judge or bribe the judge, or that the judge is his friend, and you're likely to have your case handled. That is very, very sad in Nigeria. And that is why you have seen in the last few years that industry has been destroyed in the bar. You do your research, you come to court with all kinds of reasons, does not matter anymore. You can argue all you want. At the end of the day, the man who gives the money or is involved in whatever form of corruption is likely to have the case. And some of the trial judges will say, after all, if you go to court of appeal, you will have your case, looked into again, and then you can get a justice to be done. So these are my thoughts. We need reform at the bar level. We need reform in the judiciary. But I am of the opinion that more of the reform is needed at the bar, because to be honest with you, something is just not right with the way legal practice is going on in the country.
If we're to take with, go with, one after the other, for instance, because you know that, yes, they want sweeping reforms, but then, it can only be done gradually, or it can only be done systematically, as it were. What area would you say the lawyers should be attacking first?
The minimum wage for lawyers. Because I do not have a statistic of the number of lawyers we have in the country, but I can guess that less than 20% of the lawyers who are admitted to practice in Nigeria are actually happy with their practice. Probably 70 to 80% are really, really suffering in their practice, and it is not supposed to be so. When a lawyer is in a practice, in a law firm, where you can judge that the law firm is doing well, and that lawyer is paid a stipend that cannot even be appreciated in a business center. Some secretaries in business centers earn more than lawyers in chambers. And to tell you that something is just wrong, some of the chambers, the senior advocates or senior lawyers, as in the case, pay their children much more money than the seniors in chambers, than individuals in chambers that are senior to them. In England, they have minimum wage for even people on pupillage, not to talk of people who have taken up training contract. So we need reform at the back. You're talking about gradual. My opinion is that let's first start tackling the issue of the minimum wage for legal practitioners. We need the enforcement of the minimum wage for legal practitioners. I'm afraid that at the bar level it will be difficult. That kind of regulation will have to come from the National Assembly. There should be a legislative reform that will regulate, and that is why the bar continue to say we are self-regulated, don't allow us to do our thing. But when you go over a period of time and you don't seem to achieve, you are not achieving what you want, I think that it will be important in the circumstance to ask for legislative reform. It's the same thing that happened in England. At a point, the government had to intervene. Even when you look at corporate governance, when private companies were doing all they wanted, they were giving their chairmen and board members everything. The government had to intervene in order to bring about regulation by the code. So we need that at the bar. That is the number one thing. And then number two, training of lawyers. I hold the view that chambers do not pay attention or did not place credence on the training of lawyers under them. Continuing legal education was a very interesting issue in the past through the successive administration, but somehow we don't talk about continuing legal practice, continuing professional development anymore. A legal practitioner, as soon as he's admitted to the bar, thinks he doesn't need to study anymore. But we have wide areas of practice, and the Nigerian bar or Nigerian legal practice is so limited in our perspective. We think that legal practice is just limited to the court. There is a wide range of practice that a lawyer can be involved.
Well, we'll come back and talk a little more about, these reforms that you're raising. You've raised number 2 now. We'll come back and expatiate more on that. Sunrise Daily will continue in just a moment. Join us again. Our closing moments now with Mr. Daniel Obwala, a legal practitioner and member of Lincoln's Inn. Well, you were just talking about some of the reforms that you think we should be, the MBA, first of all, should be carrying out, because you say that the MBA should be carrying out its own reforms first.
Right.
So you've mentioned minimum wage, and you've also mentioned, can't remember the second one.
I talked about the minimum wage for lawyers. And what was the second one I talked about? I also can't remember. But what I just remember, the third one, which is very, very important, is that I don't know that in some branches, in some states, they have that. Task force should be created to enforce the rules of professional conduct, the RPC, in court. Because the attitude of lawyers in court is another problem. In fact, sometimes it is even the attitude of lawyers that has contributed to some of the problems that the judges are encountering. For example, a judge is expected to turn over at least 3 judgments in a quarter. But the way and manner in which cases are conducted in court, I will give you an example of this anti-corruption war. And that's why I said we need a task force that will ensure the enforcement of the rules of professional conduct, and especially in criminal cases. For example, the prosecution, you know your job. Your job is to see that justice is being done, which means even if you have exculpatory evidence, you're expected by law to turn it over to the accused, evidence that would help him. We don't do that in Nigeria. What we find in Nigeria is that once you are appointed as a prosecutor or you are briefed as a prosecutor, you think that your primary job is to see the conviction of that person whether he's innocent or not. And that's a bad attitude. And for you to be able to do that, sometimes you will have to violate certain rules of professional conduct.
Quickly, in closing now, because we've already been wound up, just want to know, how quickly, I mean, you think that we're already on the path to recovery, talking about the Nigerian judiciary? Some people would have talked about a recent low. There were some divisions within the rank and file of the MBA, as it were, but it would seem that we're beginning to see coalition now. Do you think we're well on the path to recovery and confidence restored in the Nigerian judiciary?
I'm optimistic, and I believe that we're on the path. But I also believe that we need to have, that conversation should be robust. It should not be a conversation by few individuals who are policymakers, either at the judiciary or the bar. We need a robust conversation. We need to have the articulation of members of the bar from different jurisdictions. Somebody has even suggested we need to have what they call the Federation of the States Bar. We as states bar should be able to have independence to be able to operate and come up with ideas that will, promote the practice of law in those jurisdictions. I also support that.
Well, Daniel Bola, thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily. We're speaking to him, who is a legal practitioner and member of Lincoln's Inn. It's back to Lagos now.
Well, indeed, and that's where we also draw the curtains today on the program. Well, thank you all for watching. I'm Chamberlain Usol.
Many thanks. I'm Sulaiman Alede.
And Maupe Ogun, thank you.